comes a time in every believer's life when God's path doesn't make sense, when the road gets rocky, when the doors you prayed for remain shut, when the people you counted on walk away, and you're left asking, Lord, where are you in all this? But I came to tell somebody today, you don't have to understand the plan to trust the planner. You see, God doesn't move on your timeline. He moves on his purpose. His ways are higher than your ways. His thoughts deeper than your thoughts. And just because you can't trace his hand doesn't mean you can't trust his heart. Some of you are in a season of silence, but silence is not absence. Delay is not denial. Confusion is not rejection. You may not know what God is doing, but if you can just hold on, if you can just stand still and trust, God is working it out behind the scenes. Yes, if you just can trace his hand, doesn't mean you can't trace his hand. God is working it out behind the scenes. Yes, if you just can trace his hand, doesn't mean you can't trace his hand. Just like God is working, he's setting the stage. He's shifting things in your favor. This is not the time to panic, because when you trust God's ways, even in the dark, he will light up your destiny like the breaking of dawn. There are moments in life when everything seems out of place, when your plans fall apart, when what you thought was certain suddenly becomes uncertain. You ask questions like, why did this happen? Or God, where are you in all this? You look around and nothing makes sense. But here's the truth. Just because you can't make sense of it doesn't mean God has lost control. God's ways are not always logical, but they are always purposeful. We live in a world that trains us to think in straight lines, to make sense of things, to connect the dots. We're taught to build step by step, to work hard, and expect predictable results. If we invest, we expect a return. If we love, we expect to be loved back. If we do good, we expect good things to happen. But faith doesn't always work in formulas, because God doesn't operate by human logic. He moves by divine intention. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. His plans are layered with purpose we may not understand right away. Think about it. When God told Noah to build an ark, it hadn't even rained yet. When he told Abraham he would be the father of many nations, Abraham and Sarah were old and childless. When he led the Israelites to the Red Sea, he didn't part the waters before they got there. He waited until they were trapped, until their enemies were closing in, until there was no way out. Then he moved. None of that was logical, but it was purposeful. If you try to understand everything God does through the lens of human logic, you'll become frustrated, because trusting God requires surrender. It demands that you release your need to understand and instead cling to his faithfulness. God doesn't owe us an explanation. He offers us a revelation. But it comes through trust. It comes through the still, quiet places where we lean not on our own understanding, but acknowledge him in all our ways, believing he will direct our paths. There are some of you who are in a season right now where everything feels upside down. You prayed and believed, but things got worse. You tried to do the right thing, but doors closed. You tried to stay faithful, but people walked away. And in the natural, none of it makes sense. But I want to speak to your spirit. Don't confuse the silence of God for the absence of God. Don't confuse the delay with denial. Just because you don't see the purpose doesn't mean there isn't one. God sees the end from the beginning. Sometimes the very thing that looks like a setback is setting you up for something greater. Joseph was thrown into a pit by his own brothers, falsely accused in Egypt, and locked in a prison. If Joseph had looked at those moments, logically, he would have thought God had forgotten him. But behind the scenes, God was positioning him for the palace, because he's more concerned with building you than blessing you. He's preparing your character for the calling. He's refining your heart for the harvest. It may not make sense now, but one day you'll look back and say, if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be where I am. Trusting God's ways means accepting that His logic might not match yours. It means being okay with not having all the answers. It means walking by faith and not by sight. It means believing that His purpose is still unfolding. You may want when He wants you. It means you may want. It means even in the pain. Because in every trial, every delay, every detour, there's a reason. Nothing is wasted with God. So if you're in that place where things aren't making sense, hold on, keep walking, keep trusting, keep praising. You're not lost. You're not abandoned. You're being led by a hand you can't always see, but can always trust. God is writing a story bigger than you imagined, and when it's done, it'll all make sense. You'll see that every illogical moment was part of His perfect purpose. Faith is not about having all the answers. It's not about seeing every step ahead or having everything lined up perfectly. Faith means trusting God even when the path is unclear. It means taking the next step without knowing where it will lead, believing that the one who called you will carry you. It's easy to trust when everything is going right, when the doors open, when the money flows, when the people support you. But real faith is proven in the dark, in the confusion, in the moments when you feel lost, but still decide to move forward. You see, there's a difference between belief and trust. Belief says, I know God can. Trust says, even if I don't understand what He's doing, I still know He will. There will be times when God leads you to unfamiliar places, where the terrain is rough and the direction is foggy. It's in those moments that trust becomes your anchor. You won't have a map, but you will have a guide. You won't have all the answers, but you will have a word. And sometimes that word is the only thing keeping you from falling apart. We often want clarity before obedience. We say, God, show me how it ends, and I'll start. But God says, start, and I'll show you along the way. He doesn't always reveal the full picture, because if He did, we might try to control it. Trust requires surrender. It means walking without seeing the whole staircase, like Abraham when he left everything familiar to go to a land God promised. A land he hadn't seen, a promise that had no timeline, a journey with no visible path. But he went anyway, because faith compelled him. When the path is unclear, God is not punishing you. He's building you. He's teaching you how to listen for His voice, not just follow a plan. He's showing you how to depend on His presence, not just your logic. Because if you only move when everything is visible, then you're not walking by faith, you're walking by sight. And the Bible says we walk by faith, not by sight. That means you may have to walk through some valleys. You may have to stand at the edge of the Red Sea with no escape route in sight. But it is in those moments, those impossible, uncertain moments, that God shows His glory the most. That comes from mythos, that God shows His glory the most. You may not know why the door closed. You may not know why the opportunity slipped away. You may not know why the people you trusted turned their backs on you. But trusting God means you believe He's still in control, even when you're in pain. It means holding on to His promises when your reality is falling apart. It means saying, God, I don't get it, but I trust you. That kind of trust is powerful. It breaks fear. It silences doubt. It invites God to do the miraculous. When Peter saw Jesus walking on the water, he said, Lord, if it's you, tell me to come. And Jesus said, come. That's all. Just one word. Peter didn't ask, where will I step? How deep is the water? Will the waves hurt me? He just stepped out. Was the water clear? No. Was the path safe? No. But the presence of Jesus was enough. And even when Peter began to sink, Jesus was there to lift him up. You stop relying on what you can see and start depending on who you believe in. You develop spiritual eyes that can see hope in chaos, peace in pain, purpose in the storm. So if you're in a season where nothing makes sense, where you feel like you're walking blindfolded through life, you're in the perfect position for God to move. Keep going, keep trusting. Don't wait to understand, obey. Don't demand answers, walk in faith. Because God is not leading you to a dead end, He's leading you to destiny. Every unclear step, every moment of confusion, every silent night, He sees it all, and He's guiding you through it. Trust is the bridge between your current confusion and God's ultimate clarity. It's not easy, but it's worth it, because when the path clears and the promises unfold, you look back and realize that every uncertain moment was part of His perfect plan. Delay. That word alone can stir frustration, anxiety, and even doubt. When we pray and believe, we expect answers to come quickly. We expect doors to open the moment we knock. But life doesn't always move at the pace we prefer. Sometimes God puts a pause on our plans, and in those moments, it's easy to think He's forgotten us or denied our request. But here's the truth. Delay is often God's setup for a greater destiny. God doesn't operate on human timelines. His clock doesn't tick like ours. What feels like a delay to us is often divine timing at work. God sees the end from the beginning. He knows what's coming next, what needs to be prepared, and how your current situation is shaping you for what's ahead. When He makes you wait, it's not punishment. It's preparation. It's development. It's the refining of your faith, your character, and your ability to handle what you're asking Him for. Think about the story of Lazarus. Mary and Martha sent word to Jesus saying, Lord, the one you love is sick. Now, if someone told you your best friend was sick and dying, you'd get up and run. But Jesus waited 2 more days. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. He delayed on purpose. And by the time He arrived, Lazarus was dead. Everyone around him was mourning, confused, even angry. If you had been here, they said, he wouldn't have died. But Jesus didn't come to heal Lazarus. He came to raise him. What looked like a delay was actually a divine setup for a greater miracle. Sometimes we're praying for a blessing and God is planning a breakthrough. We're asking for healing and He's preparing resurrection. The waiting season may feel like nothing is happening, but in reality, everything is happening. In the spiritual realm, in your heart, in the hearts of others involved. God is orchestrating the details so that when it all comes together, it will be far more than you imagined. Look at David. Anointed as king when he was just a teenager, yet he didn't take the throne for years. Why? Delay. But that delay was necessary. It shaped him. It humbled him. It prepared him to rule with wisdom instead of pride. Imagine if David had become king too soon. He might have collapsed under the weight of leadership. The caves, the rejection, the hiding, all of it looked like delay, but it was destiny in disguise. God will often delay the promise until you're ready to carry it. A blessing given too early can become a burden. So God waits, not to withhold, but to prepare. He stretches your faith. He develops your character. He teaches you how to depend on Him and not the outcome. Because sometimes the real blessing isn't the thing you're waiting for. It's the person you become while you wait. And here's the key. How you respond to delay determines how long you stay in it. If you grow bitter, complain, and try to take shortcuts, you prolong the process. But if you worship in the wait, serve in the silence, and trust in the uncertainty, God moves in ways you can't see. Your faith creates an atmosphere for favor. Your patience unlocks promotion. It's not easy. Waiting never is. It tests your hope. It challenges your confidence. But don't give up. Don't assume the delay means God said no. Sometimes God says, not yet, because the table isn't ready. The oil isn't full. The enemy isn't done exposing himself. And when it all lines up, God will do in one moment what you couldn't force in years. So if you're in a season of waiting, hold your head high. You're not forgotten. You're not being punished. You're being positioned. That delay may feel like it's costing you time, but it's actually saving you from a disaster you can't see. It's creating space for something greater than you prayed for. Remember, delay is not denial. It's a setup for destiny. And when God finally opens that door, you'll understand why it took so long. You'll see that His delay was your protection, your preparation, and ultimately your promotion. Keep the faith. The best is still ahead. Obedience in uncertainty unlocks divine favor. That's a truth many of us struggle to embrace because we want to know where we're going before we take the first step. We want guarantees. We want assurance that things will work out. But God often calls us to act before we understand, to move before the path is clear, and to obey without having all the answers. It's in those moments, when everything in you wants to wait for more clarity, that obedience becomes the key to unlocking something greater than you imagined. Throughout the Bible, we see example after example of people who obeyed in the middle of uncertainty, and their obedience opened doors only God could open. Take Abraham, for instance. God told him to leave his home, his family, and everything familiar to go to a land He would show him. God didn't give him a map. He didn't provide a timeline. He simply said, "Go," and Abraham went. That obedience, even without understanding, was the foundation of the promise. God made him the father of many nations, not because he had all the answers, but because he obeyed without needing them. The same is true for Noah. Imagine being told to build a massive boat on dry land, talking about a flood when it had never rained before. People mocked him. They didn't understand. But Noah didn't wait for validation. He didn't wait until clouds formed in the sky. He obeyed while everything around him looked the same. That obedience, in a time of uncertainty, saved his family and became part of God's redemptive story. Sometimes obedience doesn't make sense to the people around you. Sometimes it doesn't even make sense to you. But that's the nature of walking with God. He calls you to trust Him, not your own understanding. He asks you to step out when it feels risky, to forgive when it feels unfair, to give when it feels uncomfortable, to stay when you want to run, or to move when you feel settled. And in doing so, He positions you for favor that logic cannot unlock. Favor isn't always about things going your way. Divine favor is about God's hand on your life, guiding you, protecting you, and promoting you in ways no man can. But it often flows through obedience. God responds to faith, and faith without obedience is dead. You can say you believe all day long, but real belief shows up in your actions, especially when you're uncertain. There are times when God will give you a word, a prompting, or a direction that feels uncomfortable or unclear. And you'll have to decide, do I wait for more details, or do I act on what I've already heard? It's in that choice that your future shifts, because God blesses movement. He blesses steps taken in faith. The Israelites didn't see the Jordan River part until their feet touched the water. The walls of Jericho didn't fall until they marched around them. Miracles followed obedience, not the other way around. Obedience in uncertainty reveals your trust in who God is. It says, I don't have to understand what you're doing to trust that you're doing it for my good. I trusted in Him, and the miracles followed obedience, not the other way around. Obedience in uncertainty reveals your trust in who God is. It says, I don't have to understand what you're doing to trust that you're doing it for my good. It shows that your faith isn't rooted in circumstances, but in relationship. That kind of faith pleases God. And when you move like that, when you obey, even when it's hard, you open yourself up to the kind of favor that brings peace in chaos, provision in lack, and breakthrough in places others said were impossible. Some of the greatest blessings you've been praying for are waiting on the other side of your obedience. You don't have to know the full plan. You just need to take the next step. That phone call you've been avoiding, that leap of faith you've been hesitating to take, that act of generosity, that moment of surrender, it may not make sense now, but it may be the very act that unlocks what you've been asking God for. So don't wait for perfect conditions. Don't delay because it feels uncomfortable. Obey God right where you are. Obey when it's hard. Obey when you're afraid. Obey when you don't have the whole picture. Because obedience in uncertainty is the door to divine favor. And when you walk through that door, you'll find that God has already gone before you, making a way, preparing the blessing, and setting you up for something greater than you imagined. God's silence is not His absence, it's preparation. That simple truth can be hard to hold on to when life is quiet, when the prayers feel unanswered, and when heaven seems still. We often associate silence with abandonment, with being forgotten or ignored. But when it comes to God, silence never means He has left you. In fact, some of the most powerful moves of God are birthed in the silence. It's in those still moments, those quiet seasons, that He does His deepest work. Not around you, but within you. Think about a seed planted in the soil. Once it's in the ground, there's no noise, no movement, nothing visible. It's covered in darkness. It's alone. And yet, beneath the surface, life is beginning to stir. Roots are digging down. Strength is forming. And in time, what was buried begins to rise. That's how God works in silence. He plants something deep in your spirit, and while the world may see nothing, He's developing something powerful inside of you. In the Bible, one of the most silent yet profound periods was the 400 years between the Old and New Testaments. No new prophets, no new scriptures, just silence. But during that time, God was positioning kings, shifting nations, and preparing the exact conditions for the coming of Jesus. No prophet said this before. No prophet said it later. No prophet said it later. God was being present. The power of God settled over Israel. This is in the book of Genesis. While people thought nothing was happening, everything was happening. Heaven was moving pieces into place for the greatest act of redemption in history. God's silence doesn't mean He's uninterested. It doesn't mean He's angry or distant. It means He's working on something that you're not yet ready to see. It means He's preparing you for what He has already prepared for you. And sometimes, the silence is necessary to teach you how to hear His whisper. If God always shouted, if He always moved loudly and visibly, you'd never learn to listen for the subtle stirrings of His Spirit. Silence trains your sensitivity. It cultivates intimacy. There are moments when you pray and there's no answer. You ask, Lord, why don't I feel you? You worship and the room feels empty. You read the Word and it doesn't speak like it used to. But even then, even in the stillness, God is present. I know that they say that God is good, but God gives you intimacy. God gives you intimacy. God is present. Just because He's not talking doesn't mean He's not teaching. Just because He's not moving publicly doesn't mean He's not shifting things privately. His silence may be your greatest test, but it's also your greatest training ground. Remember Elijah. After his showdown with the prophets of Baal, he fled into the wilderness, exhausted and afraid. He was desperate to hear from God. And when God did show up, He wasn't in the wind, the earthquake, or the fire. He was in a gentle whisper. Whisper? Whisper? Elijah had to quiet his soul to hear it. Sometimes God doesn't speak until the noise around you dies down. And in His silence, He's inviting you into deeper trust, deeper stillness, deeper faith. Silence is where God purifies your motives. It's where He detoxes your soul from needing applause, answers, or validation. It's where He asks, will you still worship me when you don't feel me? Will you still follow me when I'm quiet? Will you still believe I'm good when I'm not explaining myself? These are the questions that shape real faith. Not faith that depends on signs and wonders, but faith that is rooted in relationship. There are times when God hides you in silence to protect you. He keeps you in a quiet place so that you don't expose your gift too early. He delays your elevation to build your endurance. He quiets the noise so you can hear your true identity, not just the echoes of public opinion. What looks like isolation is actually insulation, protection from the wrong voices, the wrong timing, the wrong environments. So if you're in a silent season right now, don't panic, don't rush, don't assume the worst. Lean in, listen harder, worship deeper. Trust that God is near, even if you don't feel Him. He's watching how you respond in the quiet. He's shaping you, strengthening you, and setting the stage for what's next. Silence is not the end of your story, it's the setup for your next chapter. God is never inactive, He's just intentional. And when the time is right, the silence will break, the doors will open, and you'll understand why He waited. You'll realize that His silence wasn't distance, it was design. It was love. It was preparation for something